Ready to start? So can I welcome members, invited guests and the public, both here and watching on webcast, to today's meeting of the audit panel. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Yeah, apologies have been received from Assembly Member Duval.
Item 2, declaration of interest. Can we note the declaration of interest, and does any member have any other declarations to make? Should know. Okay. Item 3, minutes. Can we agree the minutes of the audit panel held on the 16th of October 2019?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 4, list of actions. Can we note the report?
Noted.
Thank you. Item 5, the substantial item of business, which today is to review the internal audit reports. Mr. David Essling will introduce this for us.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The first one is Appendix 1A. This is a report on the review of the GLA Open Project System, the delegation and authorisation of payments. We reviewed the system, which is a new grant and project-based IT system, which is currently used by the GLA within Housing and Land, Regeneration Unit, the Cultural Unit, Skills and Employment, and MOPAC, and also the Old Oak and Park Rural Development Corporation. Our review identified 2 recommendations, which are detailed on page 31, and I know that Naheed is here if you wish to take any questions, and we'll obviously between Mark and myself if there's any on the audit in itself.
Fine. Moving on to the next. Any questions?
No,
not
me.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, the item Appendix 1B. This was a review of the GLA Group Budget Setting Framework. This is a new comprehensive and detailed Mayor's Budget Guidance has been introduced for 2021. And this is to ensure that the GLA Group setting process is in line with the requirements of the Mayor's priorities and objectives. As you can see, the report was a detailed report of that process. We've given it a substantial rating. There were no recommendations made as it's a very effective process, but I know Martin's here to take any questions, and again Mark and myself on the audit process.
No.
Okay.
Move on.
Okay, so Appendix 1C. This is the review of the transformation programme currently being undertaken across the GLA. As detailed in 1.4, it's the transformation programme as a result of the pressures that have been built over time and the priorities of the current mayoral administration. 3 work streams that we reviewed and form part of the programme. These include talent attraction management, diversity and inclusion, and also new ways of working and shared service work stream. There's a funding of $1.5 million has been allocated to the transformation programme. As I say, we reviewed this. We have given it an adequate rating, and there's 3 recommendations which are detailed on page 61.
61 and 2.
61 of the recommendations, and Michelle's here to answer any questions specifically on the transfer programme, but as again myself and Mark, if there's any on the audit process itself.
Good. Yes, thank you. I've got a few questions. Really, I'd say they were minor concerns, and I'd just like some reassurance, really, and I can see why we got the rating that we did. First, if we go to page 57, number 9, performance monitoring, 9.1. It is a bit of a concern that it says here that however, it was found that the status of decisions shown was not always clear, and obviously the recommendation is that it should be completed clearly, showing the status of decisions and identified. Can we have a reassurance that that will be done in the future, and why it wasn't done anyway?
So so basically we take a note of every meeting that we have, and we have a record. But what we have introduced is I suppose an additional template. So we noting any decisions that we make in those meetings, issues, and risk log. So we've introduced that.
Right, so there's now a different. Right, okay. And if we look at 9.4 in the where it says risks, and then just over halfway down, 2/3 down, it says risk owners and actions to address risks were not recorded.
No, that was true at the time. We've got all the different work streams, and what tended to happen is because it's quite a changing programme, and it's a change programme, what tended to happen, we had quite fast-moving decisions. We didn't necessarily always identify who the risk owners are. They've
Right.
now actually been identified.
Okay, because it's on par really with the actions, isn't it, in some
Yeah.
respects. Okay, so if we can now go to page 58, and it's 9.5, and again the penultimate sentence there. However, start and end dates had not been identified for all activities, and the completion of tasks was not always shown.
Yeah, so what we've got there is that particularly relates to two of the work streams that we have. So one is the digital rollout. So at the time of this report, we didn't have the start date for the digital rollout, which we now do have. And the second one that we don't actually have at the moment is the timetable for the physical changes, because we're still in the consultation period. But what we have done, as I said, as part of the sort of the decisions and actions log, is noted them, and as soon as we get the timetable, then we'll add them into our.
Do you not have though a target month or season?
So yes, we
which
do.
you could then put that in, and
So
then
what we have got, for example, is when we appointed the office configuration consultants, and we've got the timeline for when they are supposed to have their work's supposed to be finishing, but not actually when all the work's sort of going to be started.
No.
But as I said, we've kind of introduced that.
But you should though, shouldn't you, have a target by which you would know those dates. So for instance, if you're having a meeting in, let's say, January, and you wanted to know the start and end dates of a future project, you should be able to say, well, by the March meeting we should have those dates.
Yes.
And that's what we need minuted really, so that if we want to have a look at it, we know
Yeah.
where
So
we
as
are.
I said, what we've got now with this decisions log is exactly like you said, when you're sort of starting stuff, and obviously when we're anticipating.
Yeah, but I understand, what you've said, and the fact that you don't always know when the start and end date is, but you could have a target date for when you would know that information. Otherwise, it can just disappear into the work. Good, thank
And
you. Right.
Yeah, and we'll follow that up obviously as we do with any audit reports.
Yeah.
So
hopefully then, would you say that those were the three reasons as to why it got such a low score, this report?
Well, it's got an adequate rating, but each of those recommendations
So we should aspire to be more than adequate.
gets a priority. Well, this comes down to the classic rating argument of whether it should be substantial, adequate, or limited. You could say that adequate is quite a wide description, but based on those three recommendations and the priority rating that's been attached to those, that comes out as adequate. But hopefully, when we come to do the follow-up, that will move up to substantial.
So we'll definitely ensure that those things are in place.
Yeah, and as
audit.
exactly, yeah, and as you can see from the timeframes, the target dates have all been end of January, so we can probably do the follow-up fairly soon, actually, to ensure that those have been undertaken.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Move on.
We're moving on to Appendix 2A. This is looking at the follow-up reviews that we've undertaken this period. This 2A, Appendix 2A refers to the follow-up review of the London Borough of Culture. As you can see, this now receives a substantial rating. The one recommendation that was made with that review has been implemented, and that's again why the substantial rating has been given. Moving on to Appendix 2B, this is the follow-up review of the Stepping Stones programme. Again, as you can see, this has received a substantial rating. Again, with one recommendation was made, and that's been fully implemented as well, which is good. Okay. Appendix 3 is moving on to the summary of our progress report. As you can see, it details the reviews that have been undertaken this quarter, of which the preceding reports have referred to. It sets out the work that we plan to undertake to complete the audit plan by the end of the year, by March 2020. And currently we've completed it's 300 days of the audit programme of the 445 that have been given. So we're well on target to, as I say, complete that work by the end of March.
Well, in that case, could we note the internal audit reports attached to the report? Thank you. Item 6, monitoring of expenses and taxable benefits. Do members have any comments on the expenses and taxable benefits of the mayor, elected members and senior staff?
I have a few, Chair. That's all right. As probably Martin knows in particular, I'm not a great fan of other expenses as a heading. I think that if there is a large sum of money spent, then there should be more of a breakdown, because it could be absolutely anything. So I've noticed, without going into detail, that there are a number of items for the year 2019-20 where other expenses have exceeded £500, and I would like to suggest, Mr. Chairman, that in future, if the item is in excess of £500 or any figure you like, this committee likes to pick, that we have at least a note of explanation on the expenses. Not necessarily a breakdown by the penny, but there must be there's a big lump in there somewhere. And I think in the interest of transparency, we should, we and the people of London should know what those big lumps are all about. If it's a few £100, and there's one there at £397.50p. I'm sure my need for information can be sort of curtailed at that sort of level. But after that, I think at least £500. Then we need to know what it might be that they're all £100 lumps, but I suspect there's a big one in there somewhere.
I think it's really good suggestion, Chair, and happy to take that forward in future reports, or highlight any comments on any significance.
Yeah, it just needs a footnote, really.
Exactly. Yeah. No, happy to do that.
Is that then Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy spent £700 on foreign travel? I'd like to know what her footprint was, environmental footprint, as a result of attending some. What happened? Where did attend some flew to some seminar somewhere to moan about people flying? Was it?
I don't have the individual details with me, so
as you can report to the next meeting.
I will write
before that.
And it'll be interesting to know what the carbon footprint of that expenditure is as well. I think that was it.
So a similar question actually asked for
Last year, though.
Oh, this is last year.
This year.
Oh, I see. But this, all right, last year's actually, I think we brought this up. The Deputy Mayor Culture had a big expense for foreign travel, 4,000. I think we brought that up when
we did.
Yes, they went to the big
world. There's a couple of we did cover it. There was a number of significant trips, including the World Cultural Forum or something. I see. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, are there any procedures that these trips are approved in advance, or
any travel abroad has to be signed off by the executive director or by the mayor's chief of staff in respect of the mayor's office.
Sure, I'm not necessarily saying that the trips are wrong or the expenditure is incorrect, but I just feel that in the interest of transparency,
absolutely,
a large sums of money should.
Agree.
Fair question.
can I just out of interest actually, with the mayor and members' expenses, which is really low, aren't they? I mean, like we're talking about 1, I think, for Len Duval. How does that compare with, say, like 10 years ago?
It will be significantly less.
It's basically people got right out of the habit of doing this for...
Yeah, I think, obviously, round about, 2008, 2009, there was quite a few, expenses scandal across tiers of government. So that sort of reduction, and also generally, I think people be more cost conscious on travel.
But that's
there has been a downward trend.
That's the beauty of transparency, you see,
Yeah.
because you know that if I was to put a cab on my expenses, everyone would see it and say, well, why? So I have to ask myself, do I really need to take this cab? So that's a good thing.
Or your Duck Island, of course, Keith. My what? Your Duck Island. Don't you remember about the Duck Island thing?
Oh yes,
Can't
yes, sorry,
really
yes, sorry.
But yes, I think transparency has played a big part in driving down expenses, and the previous mayor has continued, under this mayor, there is certainly a lot less activity overseas as well.
Yes. This mayor doesn't need to take cabs either, does he?
Right, we move on. So in that case, subject to those comments being recorded, can you please note the report?
Noted.
Thank you. Item 7, work program for the audit panel 2018-19. 2019-20. Do members have any further issues that they would like considered at future meetings? And you can note the work program for the rest of the year. Thank you. And the date of the next meeting is Tuesday, the 10th of March 2020, at 3:30 p.m. in Committee Room 5, City Hall. And my final item, any other business I consider urgent? None. So on that case, I close the meeting.
Well done. Well done. Thank you very much. Good.
Record the time, because that's what we all do as a rookie. And then you'll get to it and be like, oh,
What time did it end?
Sure.
That was very fast.
yeah, excellent. We try to limit the questions for accessibility. Sometimes you're like, is this a question? Where's it going?
Thanks for sharing.
I think so. For us, Francis got a break.
Exactly.
There's a bit more. There's
Yeah, I said to because she's got I think she's got a lot of stuff to do.
Oh yeah.
You need to sign your
I
paper.
just
You need
need
to sign.
quick signature.
Yeah.
Oh, you got your pen with you.
Yeah. Thank you. They said it.
It's the
Thank
13th.
you, January.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
GLA, Committee Room 3, Sound. 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 GLA, Committee Room 3, Sound.